The Survivors is brought to you by our friends at Calmerry. This podcast mentions suicide, mental illness, grief, and loss, and may be triggering for some listeners. So please take care of your well-being by pausing or skipping any sections that feel uncomfortable to you. And if you or someone you know is struggling, please call 988 for support. So this whole idea of creating a community, like you and I are most excited about that part of what we get to do. I mean, there's the part of getting on the podcast every week and talking about everything that we need to talk about. But then there's this other part that just comes naturally. That's a byproduct of all this conversation. And that's the community part. And that's the part I am so excited about. You and I both know the importance of having a community. And I don't feel like there is necessarily a big survivor community. Like, what do you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. Because so many people are still fearful of the stigma around suicide. Nobody wants to talk about it. It's always been that very hush-hush topic. And that's why we're here, because we do need to bring it out to the open and we need to reduce the stigma and we need to help change the world because nobody really knows what's going on in somebody's head. Nobody.
Yeah.
And being an attempt survivor, I for sure can say I didn't know what was going on. But if I'd had like a community or a resource, I think things would have been a lot easier and I probably could have opened up a lot sooner.
Yeah. I mean, in your case, you had panic attacks. You had stuff happening in your head and in your heart that you just couldn't identify. You didn't know. You couldn't put words to it, right? Is that pretty accurate?
Yeah. 100%. I couldn't find my voice or my footing because I didn't understand what was going on.
And that must have been terrifying for you.
I couldn't tell anybody because I didn't know what was going on. And at the time I was 59 and a half, but my entire life I'd been told we don't talk about mental health. And at that time I didn't even know that's what it was. I knew I was done. I was done. I couldn't take on one more thing or one more problem because I wasn't dealing with my own stuff.
Yeah. And it's so much easier to deal with our own stuff when we're not alone dealing with it. When you've got someone, whether it's, and community comes in so many different forms. When we think community, we think, or at least I think, like big, global, massive community of people. It doesn't necessarily have to be that. Community can be a small group, can be a virtual group, can be some kind of support group, meeting group. It can be just a community of your therapists or counselors or family and friends. It takes on so many different forms, but once you have that outlet and you can take those thought loops that are kind of replaying over and over in your own head and you let them out, what that does, the way that connects you to the world around you, to the issues you're dealing with, to the other people who are experiencing the same things, that's the change agent. That's the secret sauce, I think.
I think that community is so vital, especially nowadays. We're all so scattered. And I think that my community is like my Friday night clique that I have with my wife and our friend. And, to me, that's community. Reaching out to my Instagram community, reaching out to my LinkedIn community. Every time I talk about my story, I gain one new friend or I gain one new ally, and having that makes it so much easier to talk about life stuff because therapists are great. But if you also have one good close friend that you can air your shit out on, sometimes that really helps because they know you. The nice thing about a therapist is they're a third party and you don't get that angst from sometimes where you get from family and friends.
Yeah.
Or even colleagues.
They're unbiased.
They're so unbiased.
Right. And non-judgmental, and they're holding space for us in a different way, completely different way than I think the people who know us best will hold space, because the people who know us best are also the ones who are going to interject. They're the ones who are going to have opinions or have perspectives, which in some ways is really good, but in some ways maybe isn't so good because you need that unbiased opinion. And think of how beneficial it's been just in my own life. Ever since I started opening up, it's been 11 years now since I learned the truth about my father's suicide. And for anyone who's just tuning in, G and I shared our stories in episodes 2 and 3. If you don't know our stories, G is an attempt survivor and I'm a 3-time survivor of suicide loss. I didn't know my dad died by suicide for 35 years. And I didn't start sharing that truth right away. It took years for me to even get to the point where I told my kids or I told my extended family. And it was a game changer for me when I ultimately made that decision to start sharing the truth. And then it was like the whole world opened up. Then all of a sudden you hear, "Well, I had experience with that, or I've lost someone to suicide, or I mean, my story is a little bit unique because of the secretive part of it, but all of a sudden people come out of the woodwork and they want to connect with you and they want to bond with you, and all of a sudden you're learning what other people are saying and doing, and where other people are seeking out support. And for me, it I don't know, that was like the button. Once I flipped that switch, everything started to change for me. And I think the load that I was carrying in my own head just somehow got a little bit lighter.
That's really where community comes in, because it's a group of like individuals that are going through the same thing. And maybe they have different tips, different tricks to help deal with that. Really, I just gonna call it what it is. That shit in our head, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Because sometimes our spouses or significant others don't quite understand what you're going through because they haven't been there themselves. But growing a community around people that are either suicide attempt survivors or suicide loss survivors, that's huge
yeah,
because we share a common bond. Like, we got to the lowest part of our life, and thankfully for me, I made the call to 988. Like I say over and over, it was that glimmer of hope that things
yeah,
were going to get better.
yeah.
But my hope is that by forming a community of both suicide attempt survivors and suicide loss survivors, that we can help change the world's view on this, that we can feel more comfortable talking about the word suicide, that we're okay. It's life. Shit happens.
Yeah. Even that kind of shit. And this is some of the worst kind that there is, which is which is why, like, all the more reason to seek out and find, and in some cases, in our case, build community to be able to support it, because the issue that we talk about, that you and I talk so much about, this kind of loss is so, so unique. And this is not in any way to minimize any kind of loss that anyone has ever experienced in any other way. Losing someone to an illness or an accident, or however you've lost a person. Suicide is just a different animal. And more people who can bond around that and relate to it and share opinions about it and lived experiences, that's how you pick away at that stigma. That's how you drill down into that center part and you release the tabooness of it. That's how you create an environment where people can come in and share whatever perspective they have on it, and they can do it openly and they can do it freely, and they can know that it's a safe environment. And that's where my healing really started. Healing is such a continuous journey, it doesn't end, just like grief doesn't end. But once I connected with people around this, it changed something in me. It changed something for me. There's such power in that. It's like you just want to kind of grab everybody and shake them and say, just share, just show up.
Yeah, because every time we share our journey, we unlock somebody else's prison.
Yeah. Right. Right.
And for me, like, the very next day after all the shit went down, I shared on social media. I'm a true extrovert, so nobody knew, absolutely nobody knew how depressed I was. And it was during those first few days afterwards that I really found my community. Number one, as soon as I shared, I had about 200 people reach out and thank me because now they didn't feel so terrified and alone in their own journey. But these were the people that stood me up when I couldn't stand myself up. And it still happens. In November, when things got bad again, at least this time I didn't keep it all locked up. People knew where I stood. And once again, my community surrounded me. They uplifted me. They kept me going. And I think that's what we need to do for others out there is let's help stand people up, because sometimes your feet just can't hold you up. And that's where community comes in.
Yeah, it's powerful. It's a powerful image. I mean, look, the bottom line of all of it is that we're not supposed to do all of this alone. And I don't just mean grieving alone. I mean life alone. We're not here alone by design. We're supposed to support each other, which should be a we not me mentality, especially where things like grief and loss are concerned. And in the case of suicide, we need all the help we can get in this community, because It is so unbelievably isolating. There are what, 93 million people a year who are in this community that we're talking about. We just need to collect them all. We just need to reach them all, to unify them all so that people can, can support one another, because when we're left locked in our own heads, if someone doesn't know what we're dealing with, they can't help us. How are they going to help if they can't know what the problem is and know what you're struggling with? So the more often that you and I can get out here and have these conversations, the more people who can listen, the more people who share shows like ours, episodes like this, and connect with other people, that's how we affect change. This is grassroots stuff. This is what you and I are doing, is just grassroots change. And that's how it happens. It starts as a slow burn, and then all of a sudden, one becomes two, becomes five, becomes 50, becomes 1,000. And then all of a sudden people start engaging differently around it. People aren't so afraid anymore. People can say the word freely. Love the fact that we can come on here and you and I can just say suicide like it's any other word. Like, we know it's not, but we need to somehow change the meaning of the word in normal conversation.
Take a step to your mental well-being with Calmerry, trusted online therapy platform that supports you through life's challenges. Connect with licensed therapists and reap the benefits of traditional therapy enhanced with digital tools whenever you need it. Visit calmerry.com to get started.
And for me, community, they're the ones that can call us out on our shit too.
True.
There's so many times, like, I'll just keep something bottled up, and you get with your community, you get with your friends, and they will call you out on it. If they're
Yeah.
a good friend, they're going to call you out on your shit.
Yeah.
And that's basically what we're trying to do, is not call people out on their shit, but get you to open up, get you to talk freely about this, because it's not a bad word. There's a lot of bad connotations around it, but the more we talk about it, the more community we form.
Right. Right.
Especially in this day and age, there's just so many external factors going on right now, and letting people know that they're not alone. You're never alone in this world. There are crisis lines a call or a text away, and there's therapy out there. There's groups, there's podcasts, anything to get out of your head. For me, sometimes, well, not sometimes, starting soon, I'm going to be going back to the gym. I don't go to the gym in the winter because it's just hard. But I go to the gym to just get my brain to stop. Find something to get your brain to stop, whether it's coloring or taking a walk in nature or calling up a friend and going to have coffee. Anything to get out of your head also helps. Like, if you can find a good walking community, now that it's starting to warm up, that's something I want to do more of, is get out and walk around. Talk to people. Talk to your spouse. Talk to your friends. Talk to your colleagues. Let them know what's going on. And then slowly but surely you build a community around you, and it's all for talking about a common theme.
Yeah. And you know what, too? Sometimes we need something really specific. Obviously, in the case of what we're talking about, we need a specific kind of group where people have specific kind of experience. Sometimes it's as simple as start your own group. If you can't find a group, create a group. I think that we overcomplicate the process of getting people together. We're lucky we live in a world where 3 clicks or however many clicks and you can start a Facebook group. Or in most towns, there's a community center and they're dying for people to start groups and create programs. So there are so many different avenues to create the support that you need. And like you said, even if you do nothing more than engage with any kind of group, it's a support for your mental health. Even if you're not looking at the moment for a group to talk about suicide with or grief with. Maybe you just need to do what you're saying, like go to the gym, just find an outlet. Community comes in, like we said, so many different forms. Maybe what you need is just something to get you out of your own head. Maybe it's not a group even to address what you're dealing with. Maybe it's just another kind of group to get you to move your body, or it's an art class, or it's a yoga class. So there are so many different ways to experience community.
And community is important, because now that you have like-minded individuals or just a group of people, now you're not by yourself. It's when we're by ourselves that a lot of those intrusive, horrible thoughts come back into our head. Being out amongst other people makes that stop for just a little bit. It may not go away forever, but it goes away for just a little bit, so that helps me recenter. At the time when everything was going down, I think I was too far along by the time Christmas Day rolled around that I didn't understand that I needed community. And at the time, I couldn't find a good podcast to listen to. And I would go to Google and there'd be 8 million resources. Maybe 2 of them were helpful. But who wants to go through all that just to air what's going on in my head? And thankfully for me, in November of 2022, I'd seen a commercial for 988. And that is what had been stuck in my head. Thankfully, I used the number. I'm here today because of it.
Yeah, really thankful for that. The other thing about being a part of a group or in an environment where you can just really talk freely about your stuff, like whatever your stuff is, you kind of walk in the door knowing whether it's a virtual group or in-person group. Like when you walk into that community, you're safe. Because it's terrifying. It's terrifying to say the things that are on your mind just because it's scary stuff to admit in a lot of cases. Being vulnerable is really, really hard. Admitting you're afraid of something is really, really hard. Being consumed by the emotional parts of what you deal with, like being overwhelmed in public, is hard for people. But I'll tell you, so I have a unique experience as a facilitator for a suicide support group. It's through Samaritans. It's here in Boston. It's called Safe Place, and it meets the first and the third Wednesday of every month in the evening at 6:30. It's virtual, and it's a survivors of suicide loss grief group. Anyone can come. It's free, and I'm a facilitator, and so I get to moderate and watch these groups, and it's been such an interesting experience watching how people. I've been doing this for over a year now, so I've gotten to know the people who tend to frequent this group. And I watch people when they first become a part of this group. And most often people are kind of in the shadows. They're just listening, they're observing, they're engaging, maybe a little bit here and there. And it's wild to me to see the people who come in and they're the quiet ones in the beginning and they're just like fearful of engaging. I get it. It's nerve-wracking. And then all of a sudden there'll be like some kind of a breakthrough. Something clicks for them. Maybe it's something someone else said, or it's a comfort level. And then all of a sudden, this person who has been in the background the entire time is, I wouldn't say leading conversation because it's not really like that. It's more of just a general round robin kind of conversation, but they're out there. And some cases people are crying and sharing and it can be emotional at times, but at the end, those are always the people before they hop off the group. They're like, that felt amazing to be able to share. That felt amazing to be in a room with people who understand what I'm going through. That's the point. It's so simple when you really whittle it all away. It's just about being with people who get it. That's why you and I clicked so fast and so hard, because we both understood what each other had been through.
We're fortunate that we have each other. But I think about people out there that are by themselves. How many of you go out to a gym? Form a community there. How many of you go to a local coffee shop? Form a community there. Just start talking to people. I know it's hard. Believe me, I didn't say anything for 3.5 months until that fateful day. And then ever since then, apparently I can't stop talking. But that's not such a bad thing either.
It's not. It's a good thing.
But find your community and know that you're not alone. There's so many resources out there. There are people that are willing to help. There are people willing to listen. And life throws us so many horrible curveballs. Sometimes we just don't know when to duck and weave. But find your people, and it does make things better. It makes them at least tolerable, and tolerable is much better than the alternative.
No, you're right, because when you're in a group of like-minded people who are dealing with what you're dealing with, you have permission to be exactly how you are. You come as you are to these groups. And in most cases, for instance, suicide survivor groups, people are at different points on that continuum. Someone may have experienced loss very recently. Someone may be a month or a year or several years ahead or decades ahead. Wherever you're at, doesn't matter if you're, I'm 46 years out from losing my father, which is just such an insane thought to me that it's been that long. But there are days when it feels like it was this morning. And that's the crazy thing about grief. Just because I'm that far removed from when it happened doesn't mean that I can't relate with someone who's in it right now, who's going through it right now. And that's the beauty of community, because you automatically get that permission to show up exactly as you are, because people remember, people know wherever they are on that grief journey, they remember being where you were, and they're there to support that. And even if you're somebody who's like not a group person, like you don't feel like you could benefit, don't immediately write it off. Sometimes the best things in the world for us are the things that are just on the other side of our comfort zone, the things that we just can't visualize ourselves doing, but then we go ahead and we do them and we're like, oh, that thing was amazing. I can't believe it took me that long to do the thing. But groups are like that. You start off and just observe. That's the beauty of it. You can make it whatever you want. There's no expectation. It's kind of like the expectation about the 988 lifeline. People think you can only call that lifeline if you're suicidal, if you're in the middle of an attempt. So false, so wrong. Let's clear that up right now. It's for anybody who's experiencing any kind of mental health crisis. And if it's a crisis in your mind, it's a crisis. Call the line. Same thing with a group like that. It's for anybody. Doesn't matter where you're at. You don't have to speak. You don't have to share. It's entirely up to you. So I think if more people really understood that, maybe there wouldn't be so much of a fear factor associated with doing the thing, going and trying it.
And, for the people out there that are recluse, right, that are afraid to go outside of your house, in this day and age, there's tools that you can actually join community via a Zoom meeting or via a Teams meeting, or get out onto Discord, or go join a group on Substack. There's so many different avenues out there for community. So even if you don't want to leave the comfort of your house, there are places you can go to listen and learn, or read and learn, or even talk and learn, or just sit behind and absorb what's going on around you, so you're not alone. But being in that type of community, well, it's a lifesaver and a game changer.
Yeah, it is. That's why I'm going back to how this episode started, with me just being so overjoyed that the byproduct of this podcast is that we are building a community of people who have this shared experience. And look, if there are 93 million people out there in the world today who have been touched in some way by suicide, maybe you haven't lost your person directly, but maybe you know someone who has ended their life. That means there are 93 million different stories out there, different experiences out there, and people at different points along the way. And that's a lot to share. That's a lot to get from the people around you. And if you have a conversation, whether you're an active participant in a group or whether you're just, like you said, just kind of like hanging back and you're just observing and taking it all in, you're still gaining something from that. Don't ever think that just because you don't go to a group and actively participate, that you're not gaining something from it, because there's always something to take away. Whether you just hear someone's story and you find that connection point and you're like, oh, that just made me feel less alone. Okay, let's say that was it. That sometimes is enough. Or let's say you learned about an online resource, or you learned about a group, or you learned about a strategy that someone else used that worked, that you didn't try or think about before. Then there's your takeaway. There's what makes it worth it. So there's so many different ways to show up, and there's so many different ways to be part of it, and you get to make those decisions.
And what's really cool about our podcast is that we are trying to form that community. Eventually, we will have either a Substack group or something like that, so that we can talk openly and form that community. We're fortunate enough that we get to talk about this, and I'm not afraid to talk about suicide. What I want to do is remove the stigma around the word suicide. It's really important. For me, like I said, thankfully I'm alive. I get to talk about this, but we want to give people that hope that they'll be okay the next second, next minute, next hour, next day. There are people out there that will have your back.
Yeah. Well, we've got your back. So we've got your back.
So thanks all for listening, and watch out for us for next week.
Thanks for joining us on The Survivors. Remember, no matter how tough things feel, you are enough, and the world needs you just the way you are. You're not alone in this journey. There's a community here, and every step forward counts. We're so grateful you took the time to listen, and we hope you'll take one day at a time. Just know there's always more light ahead.
Thanks for being here, friends. Just remember, help is out there in so many different places. So if you or someone you know is struggling, please call 988 and a trained crisis counselor like me will be there to help. You can also find an inclusive and comprehensive directory of mental health resources, tools, and content at thehelphub.co. Just remember that help is always just a call or a click away. We'll catch you next week. In the meantime, keep surviving.